Hello, my name is Artez, and welcome back to Ensure Your Success podcast. And thank you for tuning in today. So today I want to talk about when you decide or when you make up your mind to start a business. I kind of want to talk about the phases that every person, including myself, goes through when we get this bright idea to start a business. And the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today are things from my personal story and the story of other entrepreneurs who have mentored me and who I have studied. And so that's what I want to talk about today. Now, keep in mind, my podcast is raw and uncut. I really don't use a script for this particular podcast. Just a few notes here that I kind of put on my cell phone. So you may see me from time to time just looking down a little bit, looking at some of these notes so I can stay on track and I don't get all over the place. So let's jump right into it. So earlier on in my life, when I was about maybe 8 or 10 years old, like any young boy, I wanted to make some extra money. My mother would give me an allowance, but that allowance wasn't enough to buy the things that I wanted. So I needed to make extra money. So my grandmother, God rest her soul, she would make these pecan candy and pralines, or what we call pralines, and also sweet potato and pecan pies and these little miniature pies. And so one day she made a proposition to me. She said, "Grandson, sell my pies and pralines after church, and I'll give you some money for every one that you sold." So that was my first introduction to hustling. I didn't know what it was called at that time. Only thing I knew is I needed to make some extra money because I had some things I wanted to buy. And so every Sunday after church, I would look forward to my grandmother pulling up with those pies and pralines in her car. Right after church, I would run to the car and get those pies and pralines. And as everyone was coming out the door, I would catch them. "Hey, I got some pralines and pies for sale." All right. They said, "That's Miss Gladys. Miss Gladys made those pies and pralines." I said, "Yes." And my grandmother was known for being a good cook and a good baker. And I would sell out each and every Sunday. And so right after I would sell out, I would go to my grandmother and give her all the money. And then she would, as we call, break me off a couple of dollars. And so that led to me doing other, what I consider hustle jobs, cutting grass, washing cars, working with my uncle, whatever little odd jobs he may have had, cleaning out people's basements, just anything that I could earn a couple of dollars on the side. I was just hustle. I would find anything, picking up cans, you name it, selling fruit on the corner, just any and everything that I could think of legally to make a few extra dollars. And so that kind of sparked me to take the next phase, which I call entrepreneurship. Now, throughout all my hustles, I was introduced to an opportunity later on in life when I got a little bit older of selling insurance. I had a guy come see me to talk to me about insurance. I didn't know what life insurance was. I called my mom up and said, "Hey, Mom, somebody tried to sell me some life insurance. Should I get it?" And she was like, "Yes, you should get it." So I got the life insurance. And he told me, he said, "How would you like to earn some part-time income? An extra $500 a month." So I was already in this hustle phase, making a couple of $100. But hustling get hard. And so it started to wear on me because I was working a full-time job and just trying to hustle on the side, doing any and everything. And he was like, just working, a few hours a week, going, sitting in people's houses and talking to them about life insurance like I just did you. So immediately I said, yes. I said, well, this is a whole lot easier than me working in the sun and cutting grass and washing cars and all the other things that I was doing. So I went and got my license, my insurance license. This was back in 1999. And I stopped all my hustles and I started to focus on selling life insurance. And this is what I call my entrepreneur phase. This is the phase when you take a look at all your hustles and you try to figure out what it is that you're supposed to do. You're asking God to send you something to point you in that right direction. And during that time of me getting into the insurance business, I was exposed to the teachings of the Nation of Islam, which was my beginning path to becoming a Muslim. And one of the messages that resonated with me was do for self, that you should do yourself. Don't rely on anybody to financially take care of your family. So everything kind of came together at the same time. Me getting introduced to the insurance business, also me getting introduced to those teachings of do for self. And so, like I said, I call that my entrepreneur journey. I was an entrepreneur at that time. I knew this is what I wanted to do, but I still had one foot still doing some side hustles because I wasn't quite making enough money selling insurance to just completely stop all my hustles. And in fact, I was selling insurance like I was hustling, right? I didn't really at the time understand how to run an insurance business. So I was still in that learning phase, and I did that for quite some years. So what am I saying? Most of you all would start out hustling, and that's okay. That's okay. Most successful business people start out hustling, whether they were selling t-shirts, shoes, maybe they was doing some illegal activities, but everyone starts out hustling. Then you get a bright idea to become an entrepreneur. You try to figure out exactly what you want to do. You're looking for something that you could kind of go all in. Like what it is, if I put my energy into this one thing, that I don't have to do all these other 10 things that I'm doing hustling, that I can still make money. And so you go through that, what I call the entrepreneur phase. Now you're going to go through that phase. The entrepreneur phase is the toughest phase, because two things going to happen. Either you going to let your failures, and you will have a lot of failures, cause you to get off track, or you're going to learn from those failures to help you go to the next level. And during the entrepreneur phase, that's where you're going to go through character building. That's where you're going to be tested the most at. That's where you're going to go through a lot of trial and error through the entrepreneur phase. That's where you're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn about who you are as a person. That's when you're going to go through a lot of doubts, uncertainty, dealing with people saying you can't do it, dealing with a lot of criticism. You're just going to go through a whole lot at that phase. Now, if you can manage to get through that phase, and unfortunately, few people do, but if you can manage to be the few who get through that phase, then the next phase is to become a business owner. So from an insurance agent, I became an insurance agency owner, which means that I hired and trained people. I had an office. I opened up an office. I hired a staff, and I recruited and trained agents, which I still do to this day. That's the level that you want to reach to. But you got to go through the other levels first. You got to go through that hustle phase. You got to go through that entrepreneurship phase before you could get to the business owner phase. And that's the phase where you will start to see a big difference. You'll make more money in that phase than you will have in the other two previous phases that you went through. In the business phase, it's tough too as well, but most of the stuff that you go through at the business phase, you already have been through that at the hustle and the entrepreneurship phase. Now, they may be bigger problems, but really to resolve those bigger problems, really the solution, if you go back and you looked at how you handle those problems, even though they were probably much smaller when you was at the entrepreneur stage and the hustle stage, is really the same way that you will solve those problems in the business owner phase. So I kind of wanted to share with you all today the three phases that you will go through when the light bulb goes off and you decide that you want to be a business owner. There's some phases that you are going to have to go through. On the upcoming podcast episodes that I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about in detail all these phases. So I'm going to do an episode on the hustle phase. I'm going to do an episode on the entrepreneur phase. I'm going to do an episode just on the business phase. But today I just kind of wanted to touch and kind of introduce to you the three phases that everyone goes through when they decide to start a business. So with that being said, I appreciate you all for taking time out to listen to my podcast. Please make sure that you like, follow, and share with other entrepreneurs. And I'll see you on the next episode. Peace out.